This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. And I'm thinking this is possibly one guest that you might not need an introduction to, because he is possibly the longest serving person that I've ever followed on LinkedIn. It's as simple as that. And there isn't anything that he doesn't know about social media marketing. So this is Tony Restell, and he is social media legend and founder and director of socialhire.com. Welcome to you today, Tony. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Thanks, Leisha. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
I'm looking forward to it very much indeed. So for those who are possibly living on a rock or under a rock somewhere on a different planet, tell us a little bit about who you are and what your business does.
Happy to. And I guess I'm going to show my age to start with. So I actually built a job board business originally back in 2000. So I've been working with recruitment businesses since then. And those were the days when recruitment business owners I'd go and see and try and get them interested in the job board were all sort of afraid of our job board's going to kill our businesses. And, you know, obviously we would laugh about that today, but back in those days, that really was the concern that people had. So anyway, that's my background. I spent 12 years growing and selling that business to JobSite and the Daily Mail. And then I stayed on with that business for a number of years afterwards. Through all their acquisitions of various other online recruitment tools, as I'm sure you know. And then, set up Social Hire in 2012. And in short, we're a social media marketing agency. We work with professional services firms. Predominantly, that means recruitment businesses and management consultancies. And we help them get results from social media. We help them figure out what the right social media strategy is, and then actually help them implement that. So day to day, it's our team that are doing most of the activities on social media for them.
No, well, that's a wonderful explanation, and I'm obviously probably as old as you then, because I actually do remember that. I started in the 90s, and I can remember when job boards, we used to just get the jobs out of the local paper, and you'd ring them up and say, have you got any agencies working with this on this role, or slightly better business development strategy than that. I'm just being a bit flippant, but yeah, everybody thought that was it. It was the end of recruitment. And then when LinkedIn started to become a predominant force, everyone was like, oh, LinkedIn's going to kill recruitment. And I do find it quite, not patronizingly amusing, but actually it just goes to show that as an industry, we do adapt, and we use these mechanisms and these tools and these social media platforms to our advantage, don't we, as an industry?
Exactly.
Which is the way to do it. So, well, thank you for setting the scene for us. And obviously, a lot of people will have listened and clicked on play because they've come to us through social media, interestingly enough, and probably through LinkedIn. So just so I understand, is that where you're mainly focusing your social media strategy for clients, or are there any other forums that you particularly au fait with?
So we help clients with LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Google My Business, and sometimes Instagram, although most recruitment businesses aren't really geared up for that.
Okay, what about TikTok? Where are you on the TikTok?
TikTok, we have not branched out into. We've experimented there ourselves. We've tended to find it reaching a very, very young audience. But more than that, I think most of our clients are quite hesitant about doing a lot of video. And so obviously that...
It defeats the object. As a parent of the sort of Generation Z that are obviously living on there, I've had to become quite au fait with it. And I see the advantage for recruitment businesses or professional services businesses if your target audience is a younger generation, without being sort of flippant about that or prejudice against any other age group, because there are people of all ages that I guess do go on there, but I think generally speaking, but for me, it's potentially a good way for video creation content. But I guess if people don't want to record videos, it has its limits. But I do think it's definitely one to watch, but without a shadow of a doubt, the predominant force is LinkedIn here. That's where we put 95% of our efforts. We do have Instagram, we do have Facebook, we're dabbling with TikTok, but I think it's good. So we're both on the same page in terms of where our audience. So your branding states, and that everyone will be clicking on this afterwards, and I'm going to ask you whether you can actually even do one, but apparently getting results from social media marketing is a bit like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. First of all, can you solve a Rubik's Cube? And secondly, why do you think that is?
I cannot solve a Rubik's Cube.
Me neither.
And remember many infuriating hours as a child trying to do it.
Yeah.
But clearly you can learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And once you've learned how to do it, you can do it in an incredibly short amount of space of time. So that's really why I make, that comparison, because for a lot of people on social media, they're putting a lot of time and effort into it. But at the end of the year, they're looking back and trying to figure out, did we actually win any clients from this? Have we actually placed some candidates as a result of what we're doing? And in a lot of instances, the answer's no, we haven't, or we don't know. And so I think, it's a very close parallel that there's lots of people out there quite frustrated that, that they're putting the time in, but they're not really getting the outcome that they would want. I
think that, as a huge LinkedIn advocate myself, and obviously I'm very well known for the brand that I've built for myself on there, and that's down to the consistency, which I'm sure we'll come on to. I do get a lot of feedback from people, and I think that they think this is how I'll do it, but there's no particular strategy to it. So when you've looked at accounts yourself to maybe use as testimony, whether it's, presumably your own clients, what do people do well? And then maybe what do they not? Maybe the ones that maybe pet hates. So let's do those. Let's do what do people do well and what do people not do so well?
Well, I'd probably bring that back to, I've seen over the years 2 different approaches to social media that can work. And basically, if you're not doing one of those 2, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that you're not getting results.
Okay.
One is that you go after, becoming a hugely visible celebrity. You get huge amounts of engagement on whichever platform you've chosen to, build your fortress on. And that gives you so much visibility that you do start generating inbound inquiries from that. And I think that's, and I would, class you in that category, for all the visibility that you generate.
Thanks.
Intriguing to know how much interest it generates for you. But I think what's funny on social media is that everyone assumes that that's easily attainable, because when you go onto LinkedIn, what do you see? You're presented on the homepage with the posts that are, by and large, getting the most engagement. And so you think, everyone else is getting these high levels of engagement. All I need to do is up my game and be like them, and I'll be, quids. But actually, the reality is, probably for every 100 people that set out trying to emulate that, there's only 1 or 2 that actually pull it off. So I think that's absolutely a valid route to go down if you can pull it off. And in particular, I think if you can put the time into doing that, because I do think it takes a lot of your own personality and your own hours of engaging with people and building relationships to kind of make that approach work.
Definitely.
The alternative to that is saying, actually, for this to have a positive impact on my business, I don't need the whole world to see me out there. I just need to build relationships with a relatively small number of decision makers or prime candidates, in the markets that I serve, and work those and nurture them till the point that they become clients or they become candidates. And you've got a lot of recruiters doing that in the background who aren't necessarily the most visible on the platform.
No.
But they are winning a lot of business off the back of it. So those are the 2 things that I've seen work really well. The single biggest mistake has got to be being overly salesy. Too much about promoting your own business, about what you want, and not enough focus on starting conversations and being helpful and valuable to others.
I just like to say my biggest pet hate is when somebody connects to you and then you get the sales patter and it's clearly been a copy and paste, and that's an instant turn off. You might be selling me the crown jewels for 10% off or something, but I'm not interested. I'm not going to read it. So I totally agree with you, Pat. Hey, there. I think that's really interesting what you've just picked up on there. So first of all, thank you very much. But you know what? It's like anything in life. To get to that point, Joe Wicks talks about his 10-year overnight success story. And, if anyone doesn't know who Joe Wicks is, he's the body coach, and he famously was a personal trainer literally rags to ruins. He really worked his little socks off for 10 years. And then all of a sudden people thought, oh, who is he? He's appeared from nowhere. And I think that's the truth on LinkedIn as well. I think that what you see is a swan, and what goes on behind it is a lot of work, a lot of, consistent strategy. And, from that, I mean, you asked me a question, whether it was, you expected me to answer, but over 50% of my business comes directly from LinkedIn. So, and that's a significant change from even 2 years ago, because I've always measured where my business comes from. And 2 years ago, it was 20%. So it's always been referrals and endorsements and, clients and candidates referring and recommending, which is wonderful. So it's now 50-50. So that's a lot of money comes from the time that I spend on LinkedIn, but I don't spend all day on there. No, I don't spend all day consuming on there. And I think, but it's engaging and it's meaningful. I think you use that word. I think it's a meaningful, conversation where you're truly engaging with your potential, you're with your community who could potentially be customers. So I think that's really interesting. And actually, I'm very pleased you picked up on that point about the sort of more discreet approach. You don't need to be sharing your selfies. You can actually use social media in a very, particularly maybe for exec search recruiters who have to be a bit more covert in how they personally operate. So I think that's a really interesting point that you pick up there, actually.
Well, and I said we work a lot with recruitment businesses, but also a lot with management consultancies. And in that space, they are trying to get meetings and conversations with, board level C-suite decision makers at big companies. Yeah. And those people, by and large, aren't posting every day on LinkedIn. So they're not there to be engaged with, through comments. Yeah, it's true. But they are on LinkedIn. And so if you connect to them, if you have the right approach in terms of then messaging, leaving voicemails, whatever, you can get great things to happen without necessarily being the most visible person on the platform. Yeah,
I'm at that. I don't think that point has ever been made before on this particular topic, because we've interviewed a couple of people from all walks of life across the planet, and that's never been discussed. So I think that's a really important point, and I think it will resonate with quite a lot of our exec search community that we know listen. So thank you for making that point. So it's very hard to predict the future, and as we record this, as we head towards the end of 2022, no one would have foreseen even 2 years ago the potential power of LinkedIn. I've just talked about it in my own business. So where do you see, as we look beyond, where does the value come in spending our time on social media, LinkedIn, other platforms? Where do you think we should be investing our time?
Well, one of my biggest bits of advice to everyone would be to think about how can you start conversations with your ideal clients or ideal candidates, rather than pitching for business. Okay. So I'll give you one simple example of that. So when the pandemic started, we thought as a business, okay, this is not the time to be out there trying to sell and win business, but what can we do right now that would help other people and generate goodwill and so on. And we set out to do a whole load of video interviews with recruitment business owners, consulting partners and the like, who could just share ideas that would help candidates get through this period or business owners get through this period. Well, long story short, for every 5 of those video interviews that I did, 1 turned into a client. Now, had I approached people and said, how about we jump on a call and social media could help you get through this period, I wouldn't have got a sale the whole year.
No, absolutely not. Not a 20% hit rate. That's incredible.
And then that's not an isolated example. So one of the things we do with clients is, help them figure out, okay, if you want to talk to these kinds of people about these kinds of challenges that your business could help them with, what's the right way of going about doing that? It doesn't usually require rocket science to figure that out. No.
I mean, it's social media is the new form of business development. We're not talking about replacing relationships with your existing client base. We're not talking about replacing this wonder of modern technology. But what we're talking about is that you can't be disingenuous with your message. You have to add value, don't you? So whether it's sharing some insights, and actually I'm really pleased that you talk about management consultancies, because I see a trend. Obviously I am a rec in my day job, and a lot of our clients actually are positioning themselves as management consultancies because they're doing a lot more than just recruiting. It's a lot around salary benchmarking, it's the HR piece, it's the training. There's an awful lot more than just recruiting, which a lot of this will resonate with a lot of our listeners. And I think it's just offering something that has a real originality to it, but has an intrinsic value to that customer. You're not just saying, we want to partner you, and they'll be like, well, who are you compared to everyone else? So I think it's really good advice, and that you're the proof in the pudding.
Yes, absolutely.
Having those maybe somebody should start a podcast.
Well, I mean, if I think of management consulting firms, over the years, put the pandemic to one side for a minute, what they tended to focus on is getting clients along to business breakfasts they're running, or networking drinks they're hosting, or they're writing a new white paper or thought leadership report, and they look to interview people from the industry that they want to win business, get their input for the report, but of course that gets them onto a call or into a face-to-face meeting with their ideal client. So it's all, I think, with social media, that the single biggest thing, if you want to go from posting and not really knowing what real wins you're getting from this, to it really being a consistent contributor to your business, you need to pivot and think about, how do I start conversations with my ideal clients and get them to want to have a call or meet with me in a way that to them is beneficial and non-threatening.
Definitely beneficial and non-threatening and genuine. Just be genuine in your interaction, because you will be memorable just for literally being genuine. It's crazy, isn't it? So there's often a very sort of popular conversation, if you like, on LinkedIn. One of the key things is whether or not a company brand should be focused on, or whether it should be down to personal brands. So if you're a recruitment company owner, should you be focusing your investment into the individuals that work for you in their personal brands, or should there be a company brand, or does there need to be a disconnect? What are your thoughts, and then what's your advice to our leaders listening?
So in terms of understanding the platform, if we're talking about LinkedIn specifically, individuals' accounts get far more visibility than a company page posting the same thing. So if you've got a recruiter that's got 10,000 connections, you've got a company page that has 10,000 followers, the recruiter putting out a post, it's going to get seen and going to get engagement far more than the company putting out the same piece of content. And that's in no small part because LinkedIn wants to force companies to pay to advertise and sponsor posts to get visibility. So they want company pages to get lots of free visibility. So there's that as a backdrop. With that said, it's very easy to create lots of company branded assets that your individual recruiters share. So for those on the call that are connected with anyone from Social Hire, you will see lots of video tips on how to get better results on social media that have Social Hire's branding on it. You'll see lots of PDF guides being shared that have Social Hire's branding on it, et cetera, et cetera. So although it's individuals within the team that are sharing, it's still very much the Social Hire brand that is out there. And I think obviously recruitment business owners can be wary that at any moment their recruiters could leave the business. And so there's a reluctance to have the whole viability of the company dependent on those individual recruiters' networks rather than the company's following. But you have to sort of balance that against what LinkedIn actually rewards versus what it punishes. So personally, I would say by all means post things on the company page, but really use your individual recruiters as the way you multiply and magnify how much things are seen. And then the only other thing I would throw in there, Leisha, as a little tip is for recruitment agencies that have been buying LinkedIn job ads over the years, you probably have tens of thousands of followers on your LinkedIn page who don't see very much in the way of posts from you at the moment. the newsletter functionality on LinkedIn has just been opened up to companies in the last few months.
Yep.
And it is a very powerful way of, well, we're seeing about 15 to 20% conversion rate of followers choosing to subscribe to a company newsletter. So if you've got 50,000 followers, you're going to have 10,000 email subscribers overnight.
Gosh.
If you go down that route. So that is, one of many untapped ideas.
That is gold, because I get invited daily to dozens and dozens, and I always follow, I have to say, unless it's something totally disconnected to what I do. I always follow. So, and I do often read, I do often click through and read. So that's really valuable advice, because you've already got the followers there. Wow, I knew this would be insightful, Tony, but I didn't realize just how much. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.
It's been my pleasure. I hope it's been helpful.
It really has. Thank you.